Most people shut down their gardens in May. They think the spring window is closing. They're looking at the calendar wrong. I've farmed 40 acres in central Virginia for 22 years. Before that, I apprenticed under a grower who worked this same county starting in the 1970s. Between the two of us, that's more than 50 years of reading this soil, watching these frosts, and learning what the land will do when you stop fighting it and start working with it. I lost money on spring crops for a full decade before I understood the calculation I'm about to show you. I'm not guessing at this. I have 22 years of rows to stand behind. Here is what nobody shows you. Planting logic runs in two directions. Most growers only know one of them forward from the last spring frost. You find your frost-free date in April, count forward on the seed packet, and decide what can still fit. By May, most of those windows look closed on paper. So you stop seeding and shift into summer maintenance. You water what's already in the ground. You wait. You maybe pick up a few transplants from the nursery because starting from seed feels too late. I did exactly that for the first 10 years I farmed this land. It cost me more than half my annual yield every single year. The direction I was missing runs backward from your first fall frost. That is where May becomes the single most powerful planting window of the entire growing season. In central Virginia, the first hard frost arrives somewhere between late September and mid-October. Plant from seed in the first week of May, and you are putting crops into ground with a 150 to 170-day runway before that frost ends the season. That is not a narrow window. That is an enormous growing arc, and the back half of it, the cool descent into fall, is when these specific crops reach their absolute peak. You are not planting late. You are engineering a second season inside your first one. Backward from the frost, May is the beginning, not the end. Let me tell you about April of 2009 because it's the clearest way I know to show you what warm soil actually means. I put 3 full rows of beans into the ground the first week of that April. The soil was sitting at 48 degrees. I knew it was borderline. I planted anyway because I was impatient, which is the one thing a farmer can't afford to be. Every single row came up patchy. I replanted. Still patchy. I replanted again. By the time I had a real stand, it was the 3rd week of May. Those late seeds, going into 6-7 degree soil, germinated in 6 days flat. They ran past my April plants before the month was out. I spent 3 weeks doing work I didn't need to do because I wouldn't wait for the soil to be ready. May soil is not just warmer. It is biologically alive in a way cold spring soil never reaches. The microbial populations that break down organic matter and deliver nutrients directly to germinating roots have been building since April. By mid-May, those populations are dense, fed, and running at full capacity. A seed dropped into May soil is not just germinating into warmth. It is germinating into a living system that is already working. That is a fundamentally different environment than anything March or April offers, and it is one of the reasons May-started crops consistently outperform their spring-started equivalents. Across every crop group I grow, the 10 seeds I want to put in your hands fall into 3 groups. That structure is not arbitrary. It reflects the functional role each crop plays across the full growing arc, and in voiceover, I need you to hold that structure, because it is the whole system. Group 1. The openers. Radishes, lettuce, and spinach. These are in and out of the ground in 25 to 45 days. A May planting gives you a harvest in June and early July, and the space they leave behind becomes an immediate slot for the next round. They warm the bed. They feed the soil biology. They hand off to the crops that follow. On my operation, I run these across the perimeter of every bed I'm cycling. They are the first chapter, and they set up everything that comes after. Group 2. The heat lovers. Beans, cucumbers, and summer squash. These are the crops that require the soil warmth that May delivers, and I have measured this difference on my own rows. A bean plant established in warm May soil flowers at 50 to 55 days. That same variety, started in cold April soil, can take 70 days to reach the same stage. If the seeds germinate consistently at all, the acceleration is not marginal. It changes the entire harvest timeline. On a farm running market sales, it changes the revenue schedule too. Group 3. The fall bridge crops. This is the group most home growers have never fully used. Kale, chard, beets, and carrots. These are what make the real difference, and I want to stay here for a moment, because this is where the system earns itself. When you direct sow kale from seed in late May, it spends 60 to 90 days building root infrastructure through summer heat. It is not producing its best leaves in that period. It is loading up for what comes next. When nighttime temperatures drop below 50 degrees in September, the plant's biochemistry shifts. Starches in the leaves convert to sugars as the plant's cold protection mechanism kicks in. Kale harvested in October from a May-started plant is a categorically different eating experience than anything you pull in June. I have watched customers at my farm stand reach for October kale over spring kale every single time without knowing why. They don't know the timing built the flavor. They just know it tastes different. It does. Let me tell you what beans do to your soil while they're growing, because this changed how I think about every rotation I run. When I harvest a bean row, I cut the vines at soil level and leave the root nodules in the ground. Those nodules contain concentrated nitrogen that took 55 days to fix directly from the atmosphere. The next crop I drop into that space inherits that fertility for free. No input cost. No application labor. The beans built it as a byproduct of growing. I have been running that sequence on my back 2 acres for 14 years. The soil in those beds is measurably richer than it was when I started without a single bag of synthetic fertilizer. The beans did the work. I just had to stop pulling their roots up. Carrots make the soil temperature argument most concisely. In May, soil at 65 to 70 degrees, carrot seeds germinate in 10 to 14 days. In March, soil at 45 degrees, the same seeds take 21 to 28 days if they germinate at all. A May-sown carrot reaches full size in 70 to 80 days, putting the first harvest window in late July. Succession plant a second round in June, and those carrots peak in September and October, maturing in cool soil that builds the same sugar content and dense texture that fall kale gets. 2 carrot harvests from one planting season. I run 4 succession rounds across my root beds, and I am pulling carrots into the first week of November. One more thing. Summer pest pressure on these crops is not the problem it looks like on paper. The caterpillar and aphid cycles that hammer spring cole, crop spring kale, early started chard, are largely finished by the time a May-started plant is putting out its mature leaves. You are sowing into the gap between pest cycles, not into the middle of them. In 22 years of running this sequence, I have not sprayed a single cole crop that I started in May. I have spent plenty of time spraying spring crops I started too early, fighting pest pressure that a simple timing shift would have avoided entirely. The calendar was the problem, not the bugs, not the plants. If you are working with 2 raised beds or a few containers on a patio, this system scales down without losing its function. The mechanism is timing and plant biology, not acreage. A single 4x8 bed can carry all 10 of these crops in sequence. Week 1 of May, direct sow radishes, lettuce, and spinach across half the bed. Week 2, beans and cucumbers into the remaining open space. Week 3, kale and chard into any open gaps started indoors 2 weeks prior, so they're ahead. Squash in your sunniest corner. Beets and carrots direct sown around the perimeter. By week 6, you are harvesting radishes and the first cut of lettuce. By week 8, beans are flowering and cucumbers are setting fruit. By week 10, the spaces cleared by the lettuce are filling with kale that is already 18 inches tall. The bed is never empty. Something is always going in, something is always coming out, and the soil gets incrementally richer with each cycle because root systems stay in the ground and residue breaks down where it falls. If 10 seeds feel like too much to start with, begin with 3. Beans, kale, and 1 fast-maturing green. Plant them in the first 2 weeks of May. Watch what happens over 8 weeks and compare that bed to anything you started in March. You will see faster germination, fewer pest problems, plants that improve as fall arrives rather than decline. I watched a lot of growers spend their whole career chasing the spring window, fighting cold soil, losing seeds to late frosts, shutting down production in August when the season still had 12 good weeks left in it. I was one of those growers. For the first 10 years I farmed this land, I didn't know there was another way to count. The last 12 years, I have not put a single seed in the ground without knowing exactly where it belongs in the rotation. And every October, when I am still harvesting dense, sweet kale, and the last of the fall carrots, while the neighbors have already pulled their stakes and covered their beds, I think about the decade it took me to understand something that was always true. May was never the end of the planting season. It was always the beginning of the second one. The land knew that. I just had to fail enough springs to finally see it.